Welcome to the best time of the whole week, Saturday morning. The rush of the workaday world is in the past. Monday still hasn't reared its ugly head. And this is the one day you can just sit back and relax, if even for just a moment. And one of the ways I love to relax on Saturday morning is with a nice, hot, frothy cappuccino. Somehow, through divine providence, no doubt, you have stumbled into this little corner of the internet and have discovered this podcast, Saturday Cappuccino with the Saints. Because after all, who better to share a cup of coffee with than one of the uncountable number of saints from our tradition? Each week, we set aside a little bit of time to discuss the saint of the week, or two. Some weeks are packed, as well as explore any major festivals of the Christian tradition coming up or just celebrated. I've always been a history nerd, and church history, especially with the stories and lives of the saints, are a continual source of inspiration. I hope you enjoy this little respite from the normal grind. And now, sit back, pour yourself a nice frothy cappuccino or the drink of your choice. Don't worry, no one checks. And enjoy. And don't forget to like and subscribe to this channel if you want to continue to see our content. And remember to hit the notification bell to be alerted to new videos. And so now, on to this week's episode. Welcome to this week's episode of Saturday Cappuccino with the Saints. And as you can see from the image on your screen, Advent is well at hand. This is the second week of Advent, and it has its own unique traditions associated with it. The second week of Advent centers on peace and is symbolized by the lighting of the Bethlehem candle that invites reflection on Christ as the Prince of Peace. The candle is purple, representing penance and preparation. The theme is peace, both inner and communal. And at this hectic time of year, I know for myself, peace is greatly appreciated. And the Lord knows our world needs peace right now, desperately. Violence, war, and bloodshed have not taken the holidays off. They continue unabated with mayhem and killing. This second candle of Advent recalls Mary and Joseph's journey to Bethlehem and the anticipation of Christ's birth. This is a good week to reflect on Jesus being the Prince of Peace. Isaiah 9:6 calls the Messiah Prince of Peace, and Luke 2, verse 14, records the angels proclaiming peace on earth at Jesus' birth. And Advent should be used by all believers to prepare their hearts and lives for Christ's coming. So, be prepared. Christmas is definitely on its way. And to celebrate the second week of Advent, it is only appropriate that we open up with a prayer for the second week of Advent. Merciful God, who sent your messengers, the prophets, to preach repentance and prepare the way for our salvation, give us grace to heed their warnings and forsake all our sins, that we may greet with joy the coming of Jesus Christ, our Redeemer, who lives and reigns with you in the Holy Spirit, one God, now and forever. Amen. This podcast is appropriately dropping on December 12th, and that day is a very big deal. Very big. It is the feast of Our Lady of Guadalupe. Now, I know I have a mixed ecumenical group following this podcast. Some are Catholic or very high church Anglican types like myself, so this subject may be familiar to them. Others are very much in the Reformed tradition, and thus feasts like this one gives them the willies, and they might know next to nothing about the subject or anything about Our Lady of Guadalupe. Well, I want to make the case this morning. A case that this feast, based on one of the most amazing miracles in history, and in an event that really did have a tremendous effect on world history, is one that every Christian, no matter what their denomination, should at least be aware of. It truly is an incredible story, and it all relates to a miraculous image. Now, if you live in the United States, and especially if you live in the southwestern portion of the United States, you cannot help but see the image of Our Lady of Guadalupe everywhere, in almost any Mexican restaurant you frequent. you could bet money that somewhere on the premises, Our Lady of Guadalupe will be lurking. Next time you have a craving for some chalupas and head down to your favorite Mexican restaurant, just take a look around. Most likely, she will be there somewhere. Her image has been emblazoned on the sides of taco trucks. We see statues of Our Lady of Guadalupe at soccer games, as well as in floats and in parades. You are liable to see more than a few tattoos of Our Lady of Guadalupe around, I guess depending on where you go and the crowd you hang with. But I know for a fact that she is a very popular subject for ink masters all throughout the country. One of the most requested tattoos is of Our Lady of Guadalupe. You see devotional candles based on this image in countless bodegas and even in some major chain grocery stores. I mean, our local Kroger has a whole aisle devoted to them. She appears on coffee mugs, t-shirts. They even have plush dolls based on Our Lady of Guadalupe for young girls to play with. Now, I will say, this is a major improvement over some of the trashy dolls I see some little girls playing with. I mean, you just have to shake your head sometimes. What are we teaching our little girls? Have you ever seen a Bratz doll as seen on the right? Come on now. And we wonder why some estimate that around 15% of women between the ages of 18 to 25 have an OnlyFans account. We as a culture are sending some very loud and very wrong messages to our young women. I say, fewer Bratz dolls and more Our Lady of Guadalupe dolls would be a great step in the right direction. If you ever spend any time in Texas, Arizona, New Mexico, or California, you will see wall murals like this one based on this image all over the place. Our Lady of Guadalupe sure gets around. And it isn't just out west or in Mexico where she is popular. In Windsor, Ohio, there stands a 33-foot tall statue of Our Lady of Guadalupe way out in the middle of a rural farm field. I mean, not something you would expect to find in Ohio, is it? Most statues, however, are far smaller, such as this garden statue depicted. I mean, I even have a little miniature version on my bookshelf. But the point here is clear. This image of Our Lady of Guadalupe packs an enormous cultural punch. There is no denying it. And if you are like a lot of Christians, especially more in the Reformed tradition, you might be scratching your head and wondering what this is all about. You are, of course, vaguely familiar with the image of Our Lady of Guadalupe. I mean, how could you live here and not be? But you might be wondering, why is this so ubiquitous? What is the big deal about a picture of the Virgin Mary? Well, that story is truly an amazing tale to discover. And I will bet that by the end of this story, you might have a renewed respect and understanding for the power of this image and just why it is such a big deal. Now, I don't expect that everyone is going to run out and get Our Lady of Guadalupe tat, but you might want to rethink some of your presuppositions about the image of Our Lady of Guadalupe, and you might even turn into a big fan by the end of this. I mean, I know I am. I'm all in for Our Lady of Guadalupe. All in. There are quite a few miraculous things associated with Our Lady of Guadalupe that I will be discussing this morning. But, in my opinion, the most miraculous of them all is one that, frankly, no one has a decent naturalistic explanation for. The miracle I am talking about is right there in plain sight. The complete and total conversion of the Mexico that was enslaved to the bloodthirsty gods of the Aztecs in 1518. Because by 1541, a mere 23 years later, and only 10 years after Our Lady of Guadalupe's appearance to a peasant, Juan Diego, Between 9 and 10 million of his fellow indigenous people converted to Christianity. The credit for this mass conversion by both religious and secular scholars, and the largest in history, usually goes to the revelation of this striking image of Our Lady. Something this monumental and never duplicated anywhere else on earth needs to be discussed. Hence the reason I said that this is a big deal, a very big deal. But first, a little historical background. Central America, as well as all of America, both North and South America, had, for thousands of years, been completely cut off from Europe and Asia, and thus the cultures of this land developed entirely on their own and without any interaction from other cultures. Columbus, as we all know from school, made the first sustained interaction of Europeans with the Americas. I mean, look, I know the Vikings had their explorations earlier, but little came of them, and their impact was small. It was really only after Columbus that the real flow from the east to the west began. In 1519, Spanish conquistador Hernán Cortés arrived in Veracruz and began his march inland. He formed alliances with indigenous enemies of the Aztecs, especially the Tlaxcalans. I'm going to have a lot of pronunciation problems here, so forgive me up front, who played a key role in the conquest. This should be remembered as the Aztecs were one of the most bloodthirsty, heinous, and evil civilizations ever to rise on Earth. It wasn't just Cortés and the Spanish who fought them. Other Indian tribes in what would become Mexico played a huge role in the defeat of the Aztecs. After initial diplomacy and escalating tensions, Cortés and his allies laid siege to Tenochtitlan. In 1521, the city fell, and the last Aztec emperor was captured. The Spanish dismantled the existing Aztec religious and political institutions, replacing temples with churches and imposing European governance. Epidemics like smallpox devastated the native population, reducing it by millions within a decade. This is the background as to what was happening in that part of the world when Our Lady of Guadalupe first appeared to Juan Diego. But before we get to Juan Diego and Our Lady, it is important to remember just what was going on in that Aztec world of the time. It was truly horrific. I wasn't being hyperbolic when I called their civilization evil. It was evil, full stop. Human sacrifice was practiced daily as part of a cosmic renewal ritual, especially during festivals such as Taxol. On just one day during the festival to dedicate the Templo Mayor at Tenochtitlan, 70,000 captives were slaughtered in one day. One day. Their whole worldview was completely demonic. Look, I know in our current environment, it is not politically correct to say that, but it is the truth, the brutal, ugly truth. It was all based on an idea of cosmic reciprocity. The Aztecs believed the gods had sacrificed themselves to create the world. Human sacrifice was a repayment to keep the universe in balance. In the fifth sun myth, according to Aztec cosmology, the current age exists only because the gods gave their lives. To keep the sun moving and the world alive, humans had to offer blood and hearts daily. The most iconic ritual involved laying the victims on a stone altar, cutting open their chest with an obsidian blade, and offering the steel-beating heart to the sun god. Skulls of sacrificed victims were displayed on wooden racks as offerings and symbols of divine power. Archaeologists have found hundreds of skull racks at the Templo Mayor in Mexico City. Other methods were equally demonic and also included decapitation, flaying, and dismemberment, depending on the deity being honored. Victims might be thrown into fire, drowned, or forced to fight warriors in mock battles. Most of the Aztec victims were prisoners of war, captured during ritual battles known as flower wars. Hence the reason Cortez found so many willing allies among the other Indian tribes to fight the Aztecs. They were sick of it, to be quite honest. Some ceremonies, especially for the rain god, Tlac, specifically targeted the sacrifice of young children, with the torture beforehand employed to bring the maximum amount of tears, since these were believed to bring fertility and rain. If this was not a land ruled by Satan, then I don't know what would be. This is the world that Juan Diego was born into, a true hell on earth. And to make it even worse, if that was even possible, this was not just some sort of barbaric, uncivilized, backward culture we're talking about. Historians estimate that at the time of the conquest, Tenochtitlan quite possibly was the largest and most sophisticated city on earth. Before the Spanish conquest, Tenochtitlan was a thriving, sophisticated metropolis, one of the largest and most advanced cities in the world, with a population estimated to be between 200 and 300,000 people. It was the heart of the Aztec Empire, renowned for its engineering, urban planning, and religious grandeur. The conquistadors were thunderstruck when they saw it, as it put to shame most, if not all, of the cities of Europe. Hence, we can put a stake in the heart of the lie that it is ignorance and unsophistication that fuels evil. The Aztecs exposed that lie, just like the Nazis did hundreds of years later. The worst crimes in history have been perpetuated by the most sophisticated cultures on Earth. Built on a lake, Tenochtitlan was a marvel of hydraulic engineering. The city featured causeways, canals, aqueducts, and floating gardens that supported agriculture and transportation. 3 causeways connected the island city to the mainland, allowing foot and canoe traffic. Aqueducts brought fresh water from springs miles away, and sewage systems helped manage waste, rare for cities of that time anywhere on Earth. Tenochtitlan was not just a city. It was a sacred landscape, a political powerhouse, and a cultural beacon. Its destruction in 1521 marked the end of an era, but its legacy endures in Mexico City's foundations and in the memory of its grandeur. And the fact that it was completely under the influence of satanic powers should send a chill down everyone's spine. Cortez relied heavily on his indigenous allies to conquer the Aztec Empire. These alliances were strategic, born of a shared enmity towards the Aztecs, and were crucial to the Spanish victory. The conquest was not purely a European victory. It was a coalition war, with indigenous allies outnumbering Spaniards by tens of thousands. And it was this combined force of European and Indian army that defeated, once and for all, the most bloodthirsty and evil civilization in recorded history. And this is why I chafe at this late reimagining of Cortez as villain. You really have to have a complete lack of understanding of true history to turn him into the bad guy in the struggle with the Aztecs. Look, I am no Cortez apologist. He was a soldier of fortune, after all, and had many, many shortcomings, no doubt. But it is clear from the record that he was beyond appalled at what he saw happening in the world of the Aztecs. And, to his great credit, he put a stop to it once and for all. And despite the Disney company, who somehow manages to always mangle history into a complete train wreck, Cortez was not the bad guy as he was depicted in their laughably inaccurate and wokish kids movie, The Road to El Dorado. Again, what are we teaching children these days? You have to wonder. They don't do much better with myths, by the way. In the cartoon Hercules, Zeus is portrayed as a loving husband and caring father to his son Hercules. You can't get more off the mark of the truth of the myth of Hercules than that. Sheesh. And this 30-year campaign to demonize the West in relation to the indigenous peoples of Mesoamerica has had real-life consequences. Statues of Cortez in Spain were toppled, of course, during the great woke purge the world went through back during the pandemic-fueled madness of 2020. And it isn't just controversial militaristic figures like Hernando Cortez that get swept up in this insanity. Look, Cortez was a complex character that has much in his past to criticize as well as to glorify. But St. Junipero Serra, for example, the founder of the mission system in California in the late 1700s, had his statues destroyed as well during this craziness. All part of the Spanish bad, Indian good worldview that is as inaccurate as it is historically misguided. Serra was an immensely holy man and a great benefit spiritually, morally, and physically to the indigenous peoples of California. He is called the Apostle of California for a good reason, and the gratuitous vandalism against his memory has no merit at all. He should be honored, not condemned. But the truth is, historical ignorance, coupled with blind allegiance to the doctrine of intersectionality over everything, has bred this particular moment of insanity we are living through. Hopefully, we will be out of this dark tunnel soon. I will say, history will not be kind to our times. For that, I am sure. Case in point, just take a look at this most amazing headline imaginable. Can you imagine the amount of perverted mental gymnastics one would have to perform in order to think that it was a good idea to have elementary school children learn to perform chants to honor the old Aztec gods? I mean, I will say, every day, I seriously wonder whether we have completely lost our minds in this country. I mean, here's a question I would love to ask these people who seem to think it was a bad thing that the Aztecs were defeated. Would we really be better off with human sacrifice, child torture, cannibalism, and skull racks? Is that what you're defending? It's completely and totally insane. Now that I've vented, back to the story. After the conquest, there was a complete collapse of indigenous structures. The Spanish dismantled Aztec religious and political institutions, replacing temples with churches and imposing European governance. Now, we may think this is harsh and imperialistic, but remember what was going on in these temples. They had to be destroyed. I mean, it's kind of hard to be moderate with human sacrifice, right? Where's the middle ground there? Sadly, with the Spanish came epidemics like smallpox, which devastated the native population, reducing it by millions within a decade. Missionaries from the Franciscans and Dominicans arrived to convert the indigenous peoples. The Virgin Mary was introduced as a compassionate figure, but Christianity was still foreign and imposed. The Christian faith, just similar to how it was in Japan, was just not taking root in this harsh and alien world. There was one early convert, though, Juan Diego, his given Christian name. His native name, and look, I am positive I'm going to be egregiously mispronouncing it, was Quetzalcoatl. It means talking eagle. I could definitely pronounce talking eagle, but we're going to stick with Juan Diego for the duration of this podcast, just for my own, sanity. Born in 1474 near modern-day Mexico City, he was baptized around 1524, around the age of 50, by Franciscan missionaries. He was among the first indigenous convert to Christianity in New Spain. The first meeting between Juan Diego and Our Lady of Guadalupe took place at dawn on Saturday, December 9th, 1531, on Tepeyac Hill, which was just outside of Mexico City. This hill, take note of, because it will be important, as you will see later. Juan Diego was walking to attend Mass at the Franciscan mission. As he passed Tepeyac Hill, he heard beautiful music and birdsong, unlike anything he had ever heard in his life. The hill seemed to be bathed in light. Suddenly, a radiant young woman appeared, dressed in garments that reflected both indigenous and Christian symbolism. She spoke to him in his native language, calling him Juanito, Juan Diego, a diminutive form of his name, and expressing affection. She identified herself as I am the ever-virgin Holy Mary, Mother of the true God. She asked him to go to the bishop and request that a temple be built on that very hill, where she could show her love and compassion to all people, especially the poor and suffering. Juan Diego bowed before her, promising to carry her message. This first encounter set in motion a series of events that would culminate in the miraculous image on his tilma and the mass conversions of millions of people. This is a modern-day picture of a small shrine that has been set up on Tepeyac Hill today that captures the flavor of the scene well. A much larger shrine is built further up the hill over the original site. The thing is, this hill was already sacred to the Aztec people. An Aztec earth and mother goddess was worshipped at Tepeyac Hill well before the Spanish conquest. It was a pre-Hispanic pilgrimage site dedicated to Tantanzin, whose name means our sacred mother. Spanish friar Bernardino de Seguin documented that indigenous people traveled from all over Mexico to worship Tanzin at Tepeyac, offering flowers and prayers. After the conquest, the site remained spiritually potent, and the Virgin Mary's apparition to Juan Diego occurred on this same hill in December 1531, just a decade and a half after the fall of Tenochtitlan. So Juan Diego made his way to Bishop Juan de Zumárraga and dutifully forwarded Our Lady's request. Now, the bishop was unconvinced, to say the least. I mean, I'm sure if there's any ministers listening in, they have people that come in with all kinds of crazy stories, I'm sure, all the time, and you have to just sit there patiently and listen, and this was probably what the bishop was doing. Without any proof, the bishop said he just can't believe the story. The Blessed Virgin Mary then appeared again to Juan Diego as he was leaving, asking him to approach the bishop again. Juan Diego obeyed her, and this time the bishop kind of relented a little bit and requested that the Virgin provide a miraculous sign that would prove the story. When Our Lady appeared a third time to Juan Diego on December 10th, she said that she would provide a miracle that would just prove this the very next day. The next day dawned, but there was a wrinkle in the plan. Juan Diego's uncle had become seriously ill, and Juan Diego took care of him instead of meeting the Blessed Virgin Mary. When his uncle, Juan Bernardino, appeared to be in his final hours on the early morning of December 12th, Juan Diego left the house to find a priest to administer last rites. Believing that he could avoid seeing the Blessed Virgin Mary, he took another route, avoiding Tepeyac Hill entirely. However, she still appeared to him. The Blessed Virgin Mary then asked where he was going, and he explained that his uncle was ill. In response to Juan Diego's lack of understanding of her great love for him, the Blessed Virgin Mary asked him, "Am I not here, I who am your mother?" She then told him that his uncle had, in fact, recovered. Then Our Lady asked Juan Diego to collect some flowers from Tepeyac Hill, which is usually barren, all year long, but even more so in the middle of December. He did as she asked, and he found roses, and the Blessed Mother arranged them in his tilma before he proceeded to the bishop again. The roses are important. What he found were Castilian roses, which are not native to Mexico and would not be blooming in central Mexico in December, even if they were. So Juan Diego knew that this was a miraculous sign. But it is interesting to note that these roses are native to Spain, a not insignificant detail, and a hint of the importance of this apparition to both cultures in the future. Another important detail to take note of is the tilma that the roses were carried in. A tilma is a traditional cloak or mantle made from coarse agave fibers, and they were worn by indigenous men in Mesoamerica, especially in central Mexico. They served both practical and symbolic purposes in pre-Hispanic and in colonial times. Rectangular in shape, it is worn over the shoulders and is tied around the neck or waist. It was used for carrying goods, shielding them from weather or themselves, and signaling their social status. A rough tilma like this one would have only been worn by the poorest of the poor, as the fibers break down very easily, and the garment is not very durable. This, as you will see, is a very important detail. And so Juan Diego meets again with the bishop for one of the most impactful miracles in history. On December 12, 1531, in one of the most iconic moments in Catholic and Mexican history, a fusion of divine intervention, indigenous faith, and symbolic transformation occurred. After Mary's last apparition, Juan Diego gathered the Castilian roses, and when he arrived at the bishop's residence, he bowed and opened his tilma to release the roses. As the flowers fell to the floor, a miraculous image of the Virgin Mary was revealed on the fabric. The bishop and his attendants were astonished, falling to their knees in reverence. The bishop took this as a divine sign, immediately ordering the construction of a chapel on Tepeyac Hill. But that wasn't the only miracle that occurred. Just as Our Lady of Guadalupe had promised, the following day, Juan Diego returned to his uncle and found him completely recovered, as the Virgin Mary had said. Juan Bernardino then reported that Mary had appeared to him and requested to be known under the title of Guadalupe. Now, why Guadalupe, you might ask? That isn't an Aztec or other native Indian name, but it does have a specific reference that is fascinating and a big part of this story. The word Guadalupe refers to the shrine of Our Lady of Guadalupe in Spain. It was the most important of the shrines to the Virgin Mary in the medieval kingdom of Castile, and it houses one of the many black Madonnas found all over Spain. This area also was from where many of the Spanish conquistadors came from, so they would get the connection and significance immediately. The story of the original shrine began at the beginning of the 14th century, when the Virgin Mary appeared one day to a humble cowboy named Gil Cordero, who was searching for a missing animal in the mountains. Cordero claimed that Mary had appeared to him and ordered him to ask priests to dig at the site of the apparition. Excavating priests then rediscovered the hidden statue of her and built a small shrine around it, which became the Great Guadalupe Monastery. The most popular etymology of the name Guadalupe is from the Arabic wadi, which means river, and the Latin word lupus, which means wolf, signifying a river with black stones in its bed. The shrine houses a statue reputed to have been carved by St. Luke the Evangelist and given to the Archbishop of Seville by Pope Gregory I, friend of the show. According to the local legend, when Seville was taken by the Moors in the year 712, a group of priests fled northward and buried the statue in the hills near the Guadalupe River. The most famous of these black Madonnas in Spain is found at Montserrat in Catalonia, and I've actually seen it. It was amazing. Mary and I went there several years ago, and it was an amazing journey. I highly recommend making the journey to Montserrat if you're ever in Barcelona, because it's near Barcelona. It's a fantastic trip. The Black Madonna of Montserrat, known as La Morenta, is one of the most venerated religious icons in Spain. Pilgrims travel from around the world, including us, to visit her at the Montserrat Monastery in Catalonia, seeking blessings, healings, and spiritual renewal. Black Madonnas in Spain reflect a fusion of Christian, local, and possibly pre-Christian traditions. And I think that is why the lady referred to herself with this term. She understood, better than any modern sociologist would, the impact that an image of her portrayed as a native Aztec princess would have on the local population. And, as you will see, that impact was enormous. By linking the apparition in Mexico to Juan Diego, to the shrine in Spain, and blending the two cultures together, the power of this image became unstoppable. Our Lady of Guadalupe can inspire both Spaniards and native peoples alike to unite. And now we come to the image itself. Here's a picture of it as it is seen today on display at the Basilica of Our Lady of Guadalupe. But the journey of the image of Our Lady of Guadalupe has only just begun. The Archbishop kept Juan Diego's mantle, first in his private chapel and then in the church on public display, where it attracted great attention. On December 26, 1531, a procession formed to transfer the miraculous image back to Tepeyac Hill, where it was installed in a small, hastily erected chapel. During this procession, the first miracle was allegedly performed when a native was mortally wounded in the neck by an arrow shot by accident during some stylized martial displays performed in honor of the Virgin. In great distress, the natives carried him before the Virgin's image and pleaded for his life. Upon the arrow being withdrawn, the victim fully and immediately recovered. Mass conversions began almost immediately. Within 7 years of this apparition, in which Our Lady manifested herself to the native peoples of Mexico as a sign of her maternal care, 9 million accepted Christianity, the most rapid conversion of any country in history. Remarkably, this amounts to an average of more than 3,000 people a day, every day, for the next 7 years. 3,000, by the way, is the same number who were converted on Pentecost, as recorded in Acts 2, verse 41. I can't help but think that that's a little wink from the Virgin to us. Now, it wasn't all roses and lollipops here. There was controversy about this image from the very beginning. The written record suggests the Catholic clergy in 16th century Mexico were deeply divided as to the orthodoxy of the native beliefs springing up around the image of Our Lady of Guadalupe, with the Franciscan order, who then had custody of the chapel at Tepeyac Hill, being strongly opposed to the outside groups, while the Dominicans supported it. The early controversy surrounding the image of Our Lady of Guadalupe centered on skepticism about its miraculous origin, its indigenous symbolism, which gave everybody the quivers, and whether it was a Catholic adaptation of native deities, which is a big no-no. When Juan Diego reported the apparition back in 1531, the bishop was cautious. He demanded proof, which led to the miraculous blooming of the Castilian roses and the image appearing on Juan Diego's tilma. Despite this, some clergy remained very skeptical for decades, questioning the authenticity of the apparition and the image's divine origin. One of the most persistent controversies is the claim that the Virgin of Guadalupe is a Christian reinterpretation of the Aztec goddess Tontzin, a mother deity worshipped at Tepeyac Hill, the very site of the apparition. Some scholars argue that the image's symbolism, the stars on her cloak, the crescent moon, her posture, which we will all discuss shortly, reflects indigenous cosmology, suggesting a deliberate syncretism to ease conversion. Defenders of the image, including Father Chavez, argue that while the Virgin's symbolism resonates with indigenous culture, it does not imply idolatry or pagan origins. Instead, they see it as a divine accommodation to native understanding, a bridge between faiths, rather than a replacement. From the very beginning, some early critics claimed that the image was man-made. They couldn't know because they didn't have the tools available to check it out. However, scientific studies conducted centuries later, including infrared analysis, have found no brushstrokes on the tilma, suggesting it was not painted in any conventional way. The image appears to be imprinted with pigments that defy natural aging and degradation. The tilma, made of agave fibers, should have deteriorated within decades of its construction, and yet it has survived nearly 500 years, even withstanding acid spills and a bomb explosion, which we'll talk about later, in 1921. These anomalies have fueled both devotion and debate, and probably always will. No doubt this controversy will rage for centuries more, but I think a case can be made that this is an authentic, miraculous image. Now we have to put our 21st century skeptical hats away for a minute and look at a few facts about this that should help inform what we may believe about this image, because many things about it defy rational explanation. Many. One important aspect of Our Lady of Guadalupe is this undeniable fact, and it doesn't require belief in miracles to recognize it. The Virgin's features, as a mixture of Indian and Spanish, mestiza, as depicted in the tilma, are considered a bridge between European and indigenous cultures, fostering a sense of belonging among the marginalized communities. And there was no country, area, or culture on earth in history that more rapidly converted to Christianity than the Native Americans of Mexico in the 16th century. Over just a few short decades, Mexico went from being a completely paganized culture and one of the most bloodthirsty pagan cultures ever to exist in history to being an almost completely Christianized one. And it was this image, more than any other factor, that brought that about. And it brought about the most radical and rapid mass conversion in history. That, my friends, is no accident. There's a word for that, and the word is miracle. You see ample evidence of it today. The Basilica of Our Lady of Guadalupe is widely recognized as the most visited Catholic pilgrimage site in the world, drawing over 20 million visitors annually. The structure houses the original tilma of Juan Diego, which is displayed above the main altar for public veneration. The basilica complex includes multiple chapels, museums, all dedicated to the history and the miracles associated with Our Lady, and extensive facilities to accommodate pilgrims from across the globe. The site not only serves as a center of worship, but also as a monument to the enduring fusion of faith and culture in the region. Pilgrims undertake journeys of great distance and devotion to pay homage, often participating in elaborate rituals and ceremonies that reflect centuries-old traditions. This did not happen by accident. It happened because of several miracles, miracles that defy naturalistic explanation even today. Case in point, the tilma itself. The tilma of Juan Diego is a cactus fiber cloak that bears the miraculous image of Our Lady of Guadalupe. And its inexplicable preservation for nearly 500 years is truly a mystery. To be specific, it's made from maguey agave fibers, a very coarse and fragile material that typically will disintegrate within just 20 to 60 years. Yet Juan Diego's tilma has survived since 1531. By any stretch of the imagination, it should have disintegrated centuries ago. And yet, it remains today on display in Mexico City, intact and just as vibrant and colorful as it was in the 16th century. The image itself defies explanation. The sophistication of the messages embedded in the cloth are incredible. Here are just a few. Unlike European Marian depictions, this Mary wears no crown, signaling humility and approachability. She stands before the sun, which echoes, of course, Revelation 12:1, a woman clothed with the sun, and symbolizing divine glory. The eyes of the image are looking down, a position of humility, revealing that, as great as she is not God. Indian gods never looked down. They looked straight ahead. The woman's face shows great compassion. The Indians felt that the face was the window of the inner person, a means by which one could read who a person really was, the way a person would act. A good woman, to the Indians, was one whose femininity showed her in the face. The head of the woman in the image shows her with dark skin and dark hair like that of the Indians. There could never have been a more perfect way for the Catholic culture of Spain to reach the pagan culture of the Aztecs than this image. It is hard to imagine, especially when you look at the art of the 16th century, that a European artist of that day and time would have been able to pull all these factors together on their own. This hints, quite strongly, at a divine hand at play here. Her hands are not poised in the traditional Western style of prayer, but in an Indian manner of offering, indicating that something is being offered and that something is to come from her, our Savior, Jesus Christ. The rays of the sun in the image recalled for the Indians that the sun played a key role in their civilization. It is the perfect depiction to reach across cultures. But the woman in the image is greater than even the sun. She hides the sun, and only the rays come forth. She hides the sun, but does not extinguish it. Note the crescent moon beneath the Virgin Mary, a definite symbol of triumph over darkness and pagan gods. The moon was a deity in the Aztec religion. It also has deep significance to Christians, as it reinforces the Revelation 12 imagery of the woman with the moon under her feet. There is a lot of messages being transmitted in this highly sophisticated image, both to the pagan Aztecs and to the European Christian culture. Here is a close-up of the cloak the Virgin Mary is wearing. It is packed with highly sophisticated symbolism and meaning all over it. Researchers have noted that the stars and the way they align on the Virgin's cloak exactly match the night sky that would have occurred over Mexico exactly on December 12, 1531. The stars also highly suggest that she is the Queen of Heaven, yet she bows her head in reverence to a higher power. Note the cosmic symbolism here. The constellation Virgo, which symbolizes purity, appears directly over her heart. And Leo represents Christ as the Lion of Judah that appears directly over her womb, reinforcing her role as the Mother of God. Every image on this Tilma is just jam-packed with symbolism and meaning. Every square inch of it. Including the black ribbon that you see around her waist. In that Indian culture, this signifies pregnancy, with the implication that she is carrying the Christ child, making this a Marian apparition with a hidden nativity theme. And, I will add, a highly appropriate subject to discuss and study in our season of Advent as we lead up to Christmas. Note the 4-petal jasmine flower that's shown on the tunic. This too is highly symbolic. It's located over her womb. This flower represents the divine presence in Aztec symbolism. It is a perfect message to give to that culture at that time about the Virgin Mary, with the interpretation crystal clear. The child she bears is divine, Jesus Christ. Even the angel image with wings is highly significant. Look, we are all so used to seeing numerous examples of Baroque art in museums that we may visit, this particular practice of putting angels all over everything was very popular in the 16th century. And so angels festooning everything in his path is just something we normally will just pass over. But this is significant. It is located below the tilma and holds up the Virgin, suggesting the Virgin bridges heaven and earth. The angel's wings are multicolored, which is unusual, possibly representing the union of different peoples, both Spaniards and Aztec. If this image were actually done by human hands, which I do not believe for a second, then you would have to say that they were the most incredibly sophisticated hands in history at work here. Probably the most sophisticated ever to exist. Every color used in this image just screams deep meaning and significance to both the Spanish culture and the Aztec. Her rose-colored tunic, for example, was a symbol of dawn, new life, and divine love. And her turquoise mantle was reserved only for Aztec royalty and gods. She wears it as a symbol and a sign of divine authority. Even the skin tone of the Virgin conveys a message, a very strong and pertinent message. Her skin tone and features resemble a mestiza, a mixed-race woman, signaling unity between Spanish and native peoples. Could there be a better message to convert the Aztec peoples than this one? This is not a European deity conquering a native one, but the Mother of God, in fact, the God of all people, that is beyond race or nationality. I think this is one of the most powerful messages of the Tilma, and one of the reasons it led to such rapid mass conversion. Now, this depiction of the Virgin Mary rubs some people the wrong way, especially those who are used to seeing Jesus and the Virgin Mary only in one way, and it's usually the way that they were brought up, and normally resembling people that look exactly like themselves. There are a lot of blonde-haired, blue-eyed Jesuses in art, by the way. Now, I'm no theologian, but I would bet every dime I have that Jesus did not look like that. But I think people who are upset at these depictions of Jesus and the Virgin Mary as other races or cultures are really just missing the point, big time. The Virgin Mary, by giving birth to her divine son Jesus, who did not come only to save one race of people, but all races. Mary and Jesus belong to all humanity. For example, as this picture shows, they belong to the Oriental East as well as to the people of the West. And they belong to the people of Africa, as this beautiful Ethiopian icon depicts. And they belong to the people of Europe. The Virgin and Child are for all humanity, not just one people or ethnic group. Now, some people get quite irate when seeing the Virgin Mary or Jesus depicted in a way they are not familiar with. And look, I get that. We grow very attached to the images we grew up on and are unsettled by depictions of Mary and Jesus being different than what we're used to. But for me, I think these multicultural depictions of the Holy Family are just great. I love seeing the Virgin and Child presented in all sorts of ways for all people around the world. I think it more clearly captures the true message of the Incarnation. Christ came to save all humanity, not just one race or people group. And the Virgin is the Mother of God to all people. Another very interesting fact about the Tilma is the fact that all sorts of subtle messages are contained in the image that are just completely lost on us today. For example, the color of Mary's cloak and other imagery. When Mary spoke to Juan Diego in the Aztec language that he knew, she used imagery that resonated with local cosmology, such as standing before the sun and wearing royal turquoise. Now, that detail would be highly consequential to an Aztec of that day, but completely lost on us, we 21st century Americans. This is an incredibly sophisticated image, perhaps the most sophisticated image ever formed on Earth. And even where the apparition occurred was highly significant. As I discussed earlier, Mary appeared to Juan Diego and told him to build a shrine at Tepeyac, which was no accident. This was formerly a site sacred to the Aztec goddess Tantzin that I've discussed earlier. and it eventually became a Christian pilgrimage site, transforming the indigenous reverence that they were used to into Marian devotion. This greatly facilitated the conversions of many, many indigenous peoples. And I will restate what I still think is perhaps the most miraculous event of all that took place next. Within a decade of this apparition, over 8 million indigenous people converted to Christianity, a pace unmatched in missionary history to this day. This image served as a visual catechism, teaching theology through symbols rather than words. Even the name the lady chose to be called, Our Lady of Guadalupe, has incredible significance. Many scholars suggest that the name is a Spanish version of the Nahuatl term Cotopua. I know that I'm pronouncing it wrong, but it's the best I can do, which they interpret as meaning the one who crushes the serpent. And then it may seem to be referring to the feathered serpent Quetzalcoatl, who was very important in the Aztec religion. In addition, the Virgin Mary was often portrayed in European art as crushing the serpent in the Garden of Eden. All sorts of impactful and meaningful imagery here to digest. There is no doubt the Virgin of Guadalupe did crush the certain god Quetzalcoatl. He haunts the imagination and devotions of Mexico no more, crushed beneath the heel of her son Jesus. Which all links back to Genesis 3:15, in which God says to Satan, appearing under the form of a serpent, I will put enmity between you and the woman, and between your seed and her seed. He shall bruise your head, and you shall bruise his heel. In this text, known as the Proto-Evangelium, the first gospel, is both the promise of a Redeemer to crush the serpent, as well as the mysterious participation of the woman in the fulfillment of that promise. The fathers of the church, therefore, understood Mary as the new Eve, who, unlike the first Eve, cooperates with Adam in defeating Satan. And of course, this imagery appears again at the end of the Bible, in the book of Revelation, and I'll read the passage. And a great sign appeared in heaven, a woman clothed with the sun, with the moon under her feet, and a crown of 12 stars above her head. She was pregnant and cried out in pain as she was about to give birth. Then another sign appeared in heaven, an enormous red dragon, with 7 heads and 10 horns and 7 crowns on its heads. Its tail swept 1/3 of the stars out of the sky and flung them to the earth. The dragon stood in front of the woman who was about to give birth, so that it might devour her child the moment he was born. She gave birth to a son, a male child, who will rule all nations with an iron scepter. As you can see, the imagery is all over the Tilma. You see it everywhere. Now, so far, we have just been talking about the symbolism of the images on the Tilma. There is so much more going on here than just symbols. There are completely unexplainable things about this object that just completely defy scientific explanation. This is one of the most studied objects in the world, and it continues to baffle scientists to come up with a naturalistic explanation for many of its qualities today. Infrared analysis shows that the image was created in a single step with no corrections. Now, you have to ask the question, if this was done by a human being, exactly how was that done? Good trick. It is impossible to think that a human hand could do it now or then. The image also behaves much like a modern photograph does, despite predating photography by 300 years. The cloak has also withstood soot, candle smoke, and even a bomb explosion in 1921 without any damage to it at all. Another example of the miraculous nature of the tilma is the fact that there is no protective varnish on it at all, or undersketch that has been found anywhere on the cloth. Microscopic analysis reveals no brushstrokes, suggesting it was not painted by human hands. The image appears to be imprinted with pigments that defy natural aging and degradation, and by no known method that was available at the time. Baffling all rational explanation, the image also maintains a constant temperature of 98.6 degrees Fahrenheit, matching that of a living human body. And there is no image in the world that has this characteristic. The Tilma is the only one. It is amazing. And here is a phenomenon that just totally will blow your mind, and one that was not discovered until hundreds of years after the Tilma first appeared on the scene. It has to do with the Virgin's eyes. Researchers have identified at least 13 figures that are reflected in the Virgin's eyes, including Juan Diego and Bishop Zumarraga. These reflections appear in both eyes with correct anatomical distortion, as if seen through a living cornea. The reflections exhibit the Samson-Pernicci effect. I know I'm mispronouncing that. I apologize to any of you medical people. A triple reflection found in living human eyes. This effect was not known about until the 20th century. Now, how was this done in the 1500s, if it was done by a person? And better yet, why? Without a microscope, it's completely undetectable. Perhaps this was a wink to us in our time, where we would have the methods and tools to discover this, to come to understand that a true miracle has occurred here. Techniques used in satellite imaging have confirmed the presence of these figures appearing in the eyes of the Virgin Mary at microscopic scale, suggesting a moment frozen in time, the unveiling of the Tilma in 1531. Back to the stars on the Tilma for a minute, you will notice how they're arranged on the Virgin's cloak. These are not just random decoration. The stars on her cloak, according to astronomers, exactly match the constellations visible over Mexico City on December 12, 1531, the date of the apparition. Now you got to ask a question. How on earth could this, or any of these other phenomena, have been faked in the 16th century in Mexico under the most primitive conditions imaginable? I mean, you can't even fake them today. To believe that, I believe, requires more faith than it does to believe that an actual miracle occurred in the first place. Here's a nice overlay of the constellations as they would have appeared on December 12th and how they match up to the stars on the Virgin Mary's cloak. Note Leo's position over the Virgin's womb, the Lion of Judah. I mean, the symbolism is just very, very deep here. This object is one of the most studied objects in history, and the consensus is in. It defies reproduction. Artists and photographers have failed to replicate its texture, color shifts, and depths. Scientists at the Kodak Corporation, a group that definitely understands imagery, I would think, once described it as resembling a modern photograph, created centuries before photography was even thought about. The Virgin of Guadalupe shares more than a few aspects with another greatly revered object that I'm always talking about, the Shroud of Turin. And like the shroud, the image appears on a piece of fabric. Both are sacred objects, incredibly old, and both depict an image said to be miraculous. The Virgin of Guadalupe has been so revered for so long that she was declared the Queen of Mexico and is the patron saint of the Americas. Here is an image of the old Basilica of Our Lady of Guadalupe in Mexico City. In the 16th century, Bishop Juan de Zumarraga ordered the small chapel to be constructed at the site, which quickly became a center of devotion and pilgrimage. In 1709, the old basilica, which you see here, was inaugurated, designed by Pedro de Arrieta in the Mexican Baroque style. It became a collegiate church in 1749, meaning it had its own chapter and abbot, despite not being a cathedral. Over time, though, the old basilica began to sink due to the unstable ground on which it was constructed, prompting concerns about safety and preservation, so a new one had to be constructed. And here's the new basilica, which was consecrated on October 12, 1976. It features a circular layout allowing unobstructed views of the sacred image from any point inside. The new basilica can seat around 10,000 people and accommodates millions of pilgrims annually, especially around December 12th, the feast of Our Lady of Guadalupe. Today, the basilica receives over 20 million visitors each year, making it one of the most visited shrines in the world. I'm sure it serves the crowds better than the old church did, but honestly. And here I am editorializing. But come on, Mexico. Did you have to make this hideous modernistic structure the new basilica? Why? And not to over-editorialize and get back onto my favorite perennial topic about how almost all modern architecture is just pure garbage, which it is, by the way. But honestly, this one is especially atrocious. This church looks like a giant car dealership. I half expect to see one of those giant no money down, easy credit billboards out front. The Virgin Mary deserves better than this. Much better. Luckily, the inside of the basilica is better than the outside. I mean, here's a shot from inside, and you can see the Tilma clearly. Since the attack on the image back in the 1920s, it has been heavily guarded and is always presented behind bulletproof glass. Our Lady of Guadalupe was officially declared the patroness of the Americas by Pope Pius XII in 1945. He also referred to her as Queen of Mexico and emphasized her maternal role across the continent. The feast day of Our Lady of Guadalupe, annually observed on December 12th, is just a tremendous affair, characterized by vibrant expressions of devotion, including processions and parades, masses, and traditional dancing. I mean, it's a big deal, a very big deal. And the influence of Our Lady of Guadalupe extends far beyond the sphere of religious practice. Throughout history, her image has served as a rallying point for social movements, political causes, and expressions of cultural identity for Mexico. During the Mexican War of Independence, for example, insurgents carried banners bearing her likeness, invoking her protection and legitimacy. In the 20th century, her imagery was central to the Chicano movement in the United States, if you remember them symbolizing resistance, dignity, and unity among Mexican Americans. The importance of the image of Our Lady of Guadalupe to Mexico, even after it became largely secularized, cannot be overstated. The Aztecs had an elaborate, coherent symbolic system for making sense of their lives. When this was destroyed by the Spaniards, something new was needed to fill the void and make sense of New Spain. The image of Guadalupe served that purpose. Guadalupe continues to be a mixture of cultures which blended to form Mexico, both racially and religiously. The first mestiza, the first Mexican, bringing together people of distinct cultural heritages, while at the same time affirming their distinctness. As Jacques Lafay wrote in Quetzalcoatl and Guadalupe, as the Christians built their first churches with the rubble and the columns of the ancient pagan temples, so they often borrowed pagan customs for their own cult purposes. The author Judy King asserts that Guadalupe is a common denominator, uniting all Mexicans, writing that Mexico is composed of a vast patchwork of differences, linguistic, ethnic, and class-based. King says, the Virgin of Guadalupe is the rubber band that binds this disparate nation into a whole. The Mexican novelist Carlos Fuentes once said that you cannot truly be considered a Mexican unless you believe in the Virgin of Guadalupe. Nobel Literature Laureate Octavia Paz wrote in 1974 that the Mexican people, after more than 2 centuries of experiments and defeats, have faith only in the Virgin of Guadalupe and the National Lottery. And the power of this image continues to today. Here you see the image of Our Lady of Guadalupe still used all over the place for all sorts of purposes, both religious and otherwise. Here you see an image of her that is being carried during a political rally. Cesar Chavez and the United Farm Workers prominently used her image during marches and strikes in their 1966 pilgrimage in California. She was carried on banners as a spiritual and cultural rallying point for exploited workers. Due to Mary's appearance as a pregnant mother and her claims to be the mother of all in her apparitions to Juan Diego, the Blessed Virgin Mary is popularly invoked as the patroness of the unborn and a common image to be seen in use by the pro-life movement. And there are still miracles associated with this image happening today. And here's a relatively recent one that was actually caught on film. On April 24th, 2007, an unusual luminosity in the famed image of Mary at the Shrine of Guadalupe in Mexico City appeared immediately after that city legalized abortion. According to one account, at the end of the Mass, which was offered for aborted children, while many of the faithful were taking photographs of the Tilma that had been exposed and venerated in the basilica, the image of the Virgin began to erase itself to give place to an intense light which emanated from her abdomen, constituting a brilliant halo having the form of an embryo. In the picture here, one can appreciate the location of the light, which shone from the stomach of the Virgin, and it is not a reflection or some other effect. An engineer named Louis Girault, who studied the picture and confirmed the authenticity of the negative, was able to specify that it had not been modified or altered by superimposition of another image. He determined that the image does not come from any reflection, but originates from inside Mary. The produced light is very white, pure and intense, different from habitual photographic lights produced by flashes. The light, encircled with the halo, appears to float inside Mary's abdomen. The halo has the form and measurements of an embryo. Mary is telling us something here. I hope we are wise enough to listen. The Tilma has survived many attacks in its history, most notably the one back in 1921, when a bomb hidden in flowers exploded nearby. The altar was completely destroyed by the blast, but the image remained untouched. There has been no way to explain how this amount of destructive power, enough to bend a metal cross that you see here, did not harm a single fiber on the cloth. The only word that comes to mind to explain this is miracle. And speaking of miracles, there is another miracle associated with this image that occurred hundreds of years earlier. Admiral Doria was carrying a copy of the image aboard his ship during the Battle of Lepanto and attributes the victory over the Ottoman Empire to the intercession of the Virgin of Guadalupe. The main reason that Europe was not conquered by Muslim forces in the 16th century was due to the after effects of this great naval victory. So as you can see, Our Lady of Guadalupe has a long reach. So this year, to celebrate Our Lady of Guadalupe, perhaps consider doing something a little special to commemorate this amazing feast day. Whatever your denomination, we all share a reverence for the Mother of our Lord. And on this day especially, maybe we should consider spicing it up a bit. Consider attending Mass or church if they are open. You could pray the rosary, of course, or even have special decorations with roses. And what better time is there, as if we needed an excuse, to enjoy some Mexican cuisine with tamales churros, tacos, and even Mexican hot chocolate as dessert. These foods connect this feast to its cultural roots. And a few days earlier, on December 9th, be sure to also remember St. Juan Diego. He played a big part in this story, a really big part. It's been quite a journey today with Our Lady of Guadalupe. I hope it didn't run too long, but it's a big topic. And regardless of your theological predispositions, I think she has something to say to all of us today. And as we end this week's episode of Saturday Cappuccino with the Saints, we will end with one of the many prayers associated with this feast day. God of power and mercy, you bless the Americas at Tepeyac with the presence of the Virgin Mary of Guadalupe. May her prayers help all men and women to accept each other as brothers and sisters. Through your justice present in our heart, may your peace reign in the world. We ask this through our Lord Jesus Christ, your Son, who lives and reigns with you in the Holy Spirit, one God, forever and ever. Amen. Thanks for joining me today on this fascinating journey. I will see you soon. Happy Our Lady of Guadalupe Day. Goodbye. Thank you for spending your Saturday morning with us. Next week, we'll be exploring yet another hero from our Christian past. So be sure to tune in. Until then, keep your faith warm, your cappuccino hot and frothy, and have a great week. See you next week for another Saturday Cappuccino with the Saints.